yeah. Making her way to the mic. They start dimming the lights. You start feeling alright. From Birmingham, home of the Teddy Longs and the Ruben Studders. More once you discover. For all of the lovers, Whitney Houston and Roman Reigns. For all of the lovers, and Mickey James and Marvin Gaye. For all of the lovers, and Sasha Banks, Janelle Monáe, Silk, Sonic, and Paige. Allow me to say, look, I just found a place, sweet escape. Every one of us, I was kinda late, I just made it off the struggle bus. Walking by the fate, cause I know it's right in front of us. Yo, I ain't with the hate, gotta focus on what's great. Ladies and gentlemen, Steph Hardy is on the air. Had to drop a couple bars just to make you all aware. So, sit back, relax, enjoy the show. You know I go by Joe or the rest of the flow, yeah.
Hey y'all, welcome to a new episode of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast with your girl Stephanie Hardy. Now, of course, if this is your first time listening or watching, thank you for joining me, and actually I hope that you continue to just stay on this journey with me. And if this isn't your first time listening or watching, welcome, and I hope that you're having a fantastic week. We're in the last stretch of January, y'all. Like, it's the new year and January's already almost over, but I hope that you're still having, a good go of it at the beginning of this year. And it seems that, of course, wrestling is turning up. Of course, it's always turning up. But since we're at the start of the WrestleMania season, with this weekend being Royal Rumble weekend, and this past Monday, of course, celebrating 30 years of Monday Night Raw, and then, of course, with wrestling happening for the rest of the week in terms of AEW and so many other things, wrestling has truly kicked off and it's popping off really well. So, of course, thank you for watching this episode or listening to this episode of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. Now, this episode is going to be a little bit different. Usually in the beginning, I would talk about news and gossipish with all the goings on of the news of the week. But seeing as everybody's been sort of focused on their predictions of what could possibly happen at the Royal Rumble and so many other different things, I wanted to talk about that and center the end of the episode about the Royal Rumble. But I did want to discuss all of my feelings about wrestling this week so far, as well as talk about how I felt about the good, the bad, and the nostalgia of Raw 30. Because I do have a lot to say, and there is a lot that I want to address. So I hope you stay in for the ride. For those who are watching live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and Twitter, thank you guys for watching. And if you come in later, just continue to watch that way. And just, if you have something to say about anything that's happened this week in wrestling as I discuss it, go in the comments, go crazy in my comments, and you might wind up on the screen. And of course, maybe your, question will wind up, on the audio. So, with that in mind, I'm going to start with the first segment of this episode, which, like I said, is going to be switched around a bit. So, yeah, we're going to have some fun tonight. It's going to be what I liked in wrestling this week. The name of the segment is What Steph Liked in Wrestling This Week. Now, I'm going to start, of course, by talking about NXT. Um, I'm going to start with NXT because I have a whole segment about Raw 30. So I'm going to start with this. One of the things that I loved about this episode of NXT this week is the fact that they centered their episode on the women. Now, this isn't the first time that they've done this in its entire existence, where they've had an entire episode dedicated to their women's division, but they did that this Tuesday, and I thought that was really cool. And it's always really refreshing when you see any form of wrestling on television that that values its women in this way. And I thought this was really cool, and it was definitely almost a breath of fresh air in comparison to all of the crazy stuff that happened on Monday Night Raw with Raw 30 and the lack of full feminine representation in that episode, which I will get to later. But with NXT, it seems as if, I don't know if this was the plan already, which it does seem like it was, But with them centering, so many female stories and storylines with their women, including the NXT championship, the tag team championships, Nikita Lyons getting attacked in the parking lot, um, Tatum Paxley and Ivy Nile in the tag match, and with so many other different female storylines, it was just really refreshing to see that on a Tuesday night when just a night ago, just on Raw 30, there was just a whole lot of anger and disappointment in the lack of feminine representation there. And it saddened me a little bit because I never thought that in 2023 NXT would still be doing better in terms of its female representation than the main roster would be at this point, especially when you think about the fact that Triple H is the one who kind of took NXT and turned it to what it is that we kind of know it as outside of 2.0, and where it is now with Shawn Michaels. It's like he was responsible for the women's evolution sort of taking place in NXT, and sort of those women like the Paiges, the Emmas, and of course the Four Horsewomen coming in to try to make some changes. But at the same time, the revolution was still going on in NXT, and you would have thought that the main roster would have finally caught up. But it seems like sometimes when it comes to the main roster, there's always two steps forward and maybe like a few steps backwards. But either way, NXT still has one of the best women's rosters in existence in any wrestling promotion. And I was glad that they centered a lot of the female stories in this episode. It never ceases to amaze me. So I'm going to continue to talk about the episode as we go into it. Staying in the realm of NXT, I love the performance of Tiffany Stratton. She was very impressive with this match that she had against Indy Hartwell. Of course, since she's made her return, at the start of the new year and New Year's Evil, she sort of come in hot and said that she basically runs the women's division, even though, she was still relatively new when she first got there. But then when she sustained an injury, she was out for a little while. And then after a certain point, she was out, and then she came back at the new year. And now she's claiming that she's running everything, and she didn't take kindly to Indy Hartwell giving her a reality check and throwing her out of the women's locker room. So that's where this match came from. But this match was really good in the sense that you saw a lot of great aggression from Indy Hartwell, but then at the same time, Tiffany Stratton was very impressive too. Like, she has always been athletic, utilizing a lot of her gymnastics background with backflips and cartwheels and stuff like that. And she wound up winning the match by hitting Indy with a fireman's carry into a moonsault, which came after she jumped up on all three turnbuckles, and then she hit the moonsault onto Indy in order to win the match. So this was a really good match to start with, in terms of the episode of NXT, and it was a great showing from both women. But Tiffany Stratton really did, pull off an amazing victory here since she's returned. So kudos to her, even though her character does still give me Mean Girls vibes. It's still really good to see that her athleticism is showing more promise, as she continues to flourish and grow as a wrestler. So that was amazing. Another part I liked about NXT was the not the coronation. I almost said the coronation like she's a queen, but Thea Hale had a ceremony involving her, of course, celebrating her first match won last week. Like, she won her very first match. And of course, since she's affiliated with Chase University with Professor Andre Chase and Duke Hudson back there, they wanted to celebrate, the student section wanted to celebrate her in her first win. And I thought this was a nice gesture. And the thing that I thought was really funny was the fact that on commentary, they were making it, or at least probably, well, more than likely Booker T was making it seem like a first win isn't necessarily like a really big deal. But in actuality, I feel like this was, a pretty healthy representation of what it means when you truly care about something, like when you've done something and worked hard at something for so long, and it seemed like you always, failed at it, or, were struggling a little bit. But now when you finally got a victory in that thing and you get to celebrate that, like, I can't tell you how many times um I've had to talk myself into celebrating different things, on my own that I've done in terms of accomplishments. Because when you do accomplish things, sometimes, in life you suffer from imposter syndrome and you think what you did, it wasn't that big of a deal. But it really is that big of a deal, if you've worked hard at it. And if it was something that, you just felt like you're proud of that you did, it really does matter. And I felt like this with Thea Hale, this segment with Thea Hale was a great representation of that. And Andre Chase just proved that he's a very supportive professor, of course, and Duke Hudson was back there as their friend. It was just really good to see, even though deep down inside, I still wish that Bodie Hayward was there. But, stuff happens. But the thing that I did not like about this segment was the fact that JD McDonough decided to rear in his ugly head in this situation. And he was mad disrespectful to Thea Hill and the rest of the crew. Like when Thea Hill was getting angry and it looked like she was about to rile up and tackle him and yell at him or whatever, while he was sort of running down the fact that she got what he called a participation trophy for winning, he told Duke Hudson to calm down your dog. Or no, he said control your dog. And I was like, ew, that's disrespectful. Why would you call a person a dog? Like, if I feel like if this were a different era, he would have said another nasty word, but I still feel like you shouldn't call a woman a dog, regardless of how she's acting or how she's feeling about a certain thing. She has the right to be angry. This is her big moment, and you came in here and interrupted it and made it all about you. Like she had a right to be angry about that. So I didn't like that part of it. And of course, this did lead to a match with Andre Chase and JD McDonough, which I believe McDonough wound up winning. But in the end, I just didn't like that JD McDonough was making it all about him and making it seem like Thea had a participation trophy. No, it was a healthy celebration. And all you guys that are watching and listening, please know that if you celebrate something that you've done, it's never too much. It is never too much. Like Luther Vandross. Yeah. So I like this segment right here. It was cool until JD McDonough decided to pop up. Also on NXT, something that I like that's fully developing and fleshing out is the love story between Brooks Jensen and Kiana James, which I thought was a really big surprise considering Kiana James started off wanting to bully Josh Briggs and Brooks Jensen and Fallon Henley by trying to buy Fallon's family bar. And of course, they wound up having a match to save the bar, and Fallon wound up winning. But yet, somehow or another, Kiana started a little bit of a romance and kindled some chemistry between Brooks Jensen and at first Fallon Henley didn't like it, but it's looking like it's beginning to pay some dividends because of course when there was a battle royal to try to like figure out who was going to be the number one contender a few weeks ago, Kiana James actually had Fallon Henley's back. And that of course impressed her, but it also impressed Brooks Jensen because he cares about the both of them. So because he cared about this and because they had a tag team match in which I just remembered, a tag team match in which they did fight Tatum Paxley and Ivy Nowell and came out in victory, Brooks went to Shawn Michaels' office and asked if the both of them could have a women's tag team title chance between at well, I don't know, I believe it's going to be next week, and they're gonna fight Team KC Square for those titles. And at first Fallon didn't like it, but then she decided to go along with it and challenge them anyway later on in the night. So that was cool. But the funniest part about Brooks Jensen and his segment with backstage with the crew was the fact that he said when he went in Shawn Michaels' office, he said that he was so nervous that he could have pissed a river. And and I thought that was the most hilarious thing I've ever heard. And then it makes it even funnier because, of course, he is from Alabama. He's from Ranburne, Alabama. And that just sounds like a very funny country saying that you would hear someone say. And I just felt like that just made me laugh pretty hard. And then he also said when he brought up the idea of the tag team match that Shawn Michaels was happier than gravy on a biscuit. And that's definitely country right there. So I appreciate that level of representation there. I'm not a country girl because, of course, the city of Birmingham is like more of an urban area, very city like. Whereas my grandmother, may she rest in peace, both of my grandmothers are from Selma and Eutaw, Alabama. So they've told me plenty of stories about their, country adventures. So I kind of appreciated that a whole lot, as a Southern girl. So that was just really cool. And, hopefully Fallon and Kiana can put aside their differences and learn to coexist. Who knows? But I still thought that was cool. Something else that I am beginning to appreciate a little bit more is the alignment of Jinder Mahal with Indushare. Like, it was a minute where it seemed like Jinder Mahal was a little bit lost in the shuffle on the main roster. And a part of me was, and then after he was a little bit lost in the shuffle on SmackDown, he kind of disappeared because he was hanging out with Shanky, and Shanky was dancing a lot, but he didn't appreciate that. So I guess, they had a parting of the ways, and then, we just didn't see him on TV anymore since the regime change. But he made his debut on NXT and he's aligned himself with Indushire, making yet another faction running around in the WWE looking powerful and proud, and fresh to death in their suits and stuff. And I think that this is probably a really good place for him at this stage of his career. He's been a WWE champion. He's been in a faction like 3MB before. Like, he's basically done it all. He's left and he's come back, you know, a couple of times. So I feel like if he's going to sort of reinvent himself on a new level, then NXT is the right place. And then with his notoriety, as an icon in WWE already, he can help put over Sangha and Veer Mahan in a way that might make them look really important. And considering they're beefing with the Creed brothers too, I think that's going to be real interesting as well. So I'm glad that Jinder Mahal is getting like this new life breathed into his career in a new way. So I think that this is really cool. Indushare looks pretty awesome here with him at the helm of it. Another thing that I like about NXT is the fact that Drew Gulak is also having new life breathed into his career because he's playing the character of being a wrestling coach. Because if you have or have not seen this man wrestle, like he's very technically sound, and I like his wrestling skills. But the thing about him is it's just the fact that what a lot of people don't know is the fact that Drew Gulak really is a um coach. He has his own wrestling school. And some of the wrestlers that I've actually interviewed on my show before, like Brittany Blake, have been coached by him and they've learned a lot from him. And she's learned a lot from him as well. So it feels really good to see that he's sort of tapping into this level of his knowledge as a wrestling coach and as a wrestler on television himself, because he seemed kind of lost in the shuffle with his, characters as well, outside of 205 Live, because there was a minute where on 205 Live, he was, a little bit of a heel and he was angry, but he was still putting on good matches. And I believe he even won the cruiserweight title at some point. But either way, after that point, he was a little bit lost and he would fight like technical matches whenever they needed it. But there wasn't anything that people fully like pushed him, towards, or his character wasn't really like a thing that people really got behind that much. So now it seems like on NXT he has a whole new, groove to him, being a wrestling coach and sort of coaching people while also being kind of hard at it as well. And it's kind of villainous, like he's like a crazy evil teacher as well. And he's going to, and it looks like they're building up to this beef that he's supposed to have with Charlie Dempsey, who is famously, of course, the son of William Regal. So I think that's going to be really interesting for someone like him at this point of his career, and him being technically sound and also being a coach in terms of his character. I feel like it's very organic for him. And in the comments, Malcolm, thank you for watching. And yeah, I'm at the desk. I'm at the desk in my house doing this thing. So another thing I loved about NXT was the Cut Wiz segment involving Apollo Crews sitting in Carmelo Hayes' chair at the barber shop, which is something that you don't do. Because Carmelo, of course, said he owns the barbershop. And I was like, oh, when did this happen? But, that's the place where him and Trick Williams, usually hang out and clear their minds and stuff, which is here again, A+ representation for Black men on television, on wrestling television, because this is something that really does happen within, the culture. black men and also black women, come to the barbershop or the beauty shop to clear their heads, of course, make themselves look nice, but also talk about the things that are going on in their lives. And I love this level of representation. And something that I thought was really interesting was last week on NXT, Apollo said he was actually going to go to the barbershop and maybe get a cut. But my thing is, he has no hair on his head. All of his hair is in his beard. So I'm just trying to figure out, bro, what you gonna do? But he really went there and sat in Carmelo's chair. And Carmelo didn't take too kindly to that. They had words back and forth because they've been beefing with each other for the past couple of weeks and have had killer matches, tag team and singles matches. So of course, this led to them announcing that at NXT Vengeance Day, they're going to have a 2 out of 3 falls match to see which one out of them is the better man and is qualified enough to challenge whoever is going to be the NXT champion after Vengeance Day, because Braun Breaker and Grayson Waller have their match too. But this segment was really good. And I just never thought I would see Apollo Crews in this type of environment, but I did appreciate it. But I still look at Apollo Crews with a side eye because of how he sort of just dropped his entire Nigerian heritage due to the fact that he felt like, oh well, other his kids wasn't gonna understand him and all this other stuff, and he wasn't being himself. No, you were being yourself. You were just tapping into a different, more ancestral part of yourself. But then it's just like when it wasn't making people feel comfortable, you dropped it. And it was just like, bro, why? But either way, I thought this was cool. Moving on in cool things in NXT, Elektra Lopez, ever since she was separated from Legado del Fantasma when they came up to the main roster, she's been intriguing in the sense that she's never really been boring. She's good in the ring, but her personality is very magnetic. And of course, she's a very beautiful woman. And it seems like she's sort of cooking up a woman's faction, like a Latina woman's faction, because she's been sort of coaching and talking to two women on the NXT roster, Valentina Feroz and another woman who is new, and I can't remember her name right now. But they're both of Latin descent, and it's just like with the more that she's talking to them and trying to coach them inside the ring and talk about, how you need to win matches in dirty ways or whatever, the more I feel like she might be starting a faction. And it's not the worst thing in the world. I'm actually okay with it. So, hey, if she's going to start another women's faction, I'm all for it. Because, I mean, with Toxic Attraction being just a tag team now, we can always use an all female group, an all female faction. Like, I'm here for it. I'm here for it on NXT, and I'm also here for it on WoW, too. So, yeah, I love that level of representation from Elektra Lopez. Something else that on NXT that I'm not starting to get a hold of, but something that I've seen a lot on social media is Grayson Waller and his heel tactics sort of um getting inside of the head of Braun Breaker, of course, leading up to their match that I mentioned earlier at Vengeance Day for the NXT title. It seems like he really might possibly out heal the Miz. And I never thought I would ever say that in the entire history of my life, but I really feel like he might possibly out heal the Miz in a sense that he's just very dastardly, and not just dastardly in the sense that he thinks he's famous and he has his wholly inflated ego, but he's also dangerous in the sense that he doesn't care where he'll confront you at. Because of course this week he confronted Braun Breaker in the gym and was calling him all kinds of names, and they got to fighting in there. And then on the episode of NXT proper, like, he got in Braun Breaker's head so bad that Braun was running at him and ran in and broke the barricade. Like, what the heck? Like, it's crazy. And I'm just wondering, like, is it possible that Grayson Waller, and all his deviousness and his arrogance and all of his I like to diss the wrestling clubness, because that pissed me off. Um um it's like he could possibly like out heal the Miz. And I feel like if he came to the main roster and got inside the Miz's face, that would be really like good television for me. It would be very entertaining and I would like it a lot. I'm pushing for Grayson Waller versus The Miz. That really needs to happen at some point. Maybe The Miz will come down to NXT. Maybe Grayson will go up there and then leave to come back to NXT. Who knows? But either way, I still think that would be very amazing. And yeah, like I said, of course, this is all in preparation for their NXT championship match. This graphic is for New Year's Evil, but they're fighting at Vengeance Day. So I'm sorry about that. But either way, y'all get the point. Um and lastly, another thing that I loved about NXT this week was the seeming dissension that was going on between Team Toxic, of course, JC Jane and my wife Gigi Dolan. They were fighting each other. They had separate promos and they were calling each other names. In the first promo that JC cut, she actually said that she felt like she had to carry Gigi's weight in the tag team when they were tag team champions. Like she felt like Gigi was less important than her because she was the coolest one. And then Gigi would actually go on to say that she was the one that actually felt like she had the most personality and all of that. So with the both of them griping at each other, even at the women's championship summit, like it really did look like they were about to destroy each other and fight each other because they were really throwing all types of insults at each other. And my thing is, it was just so funny and beautiful to see because when you see Gigi and how far she's grown, because she's been in NXT 2 years and she actually celebrated her NXT anniversary this week. Like she's come so far, from the girl that we just knew with just orange hair, who teamed with Cora Jade in the Dusty Rose Women's Tag Team Classic. Like she's come really far. And so is JC as well. They really did really gun for each other and they proved that they can stand on their own 2 feet without the presence of Mandy Rose, who is sadly no longer with the company. And they attacked Roxanne and beat up on her and basically posed with the title in the middle. And what's so funny is it's almost haunting to look at that picture in that way because it was just so long ago where their leader was Mandy Rose and she was holding up that title and they were standing side by side with her. And now they're holding up the title. There's an empty space in the middle. And now it's just those two upholding the honor or the dishonor of Toxic Attraction. It's crazy how it's happening, but this is where we are. And Roxanne got attacked and she was literally, eating it up hook, line, and sinker just like everybody. But they fooled us and slammed Roxanne through the table and held up the title. And it reminded me a lot of the tag team Lay Cool, if you remember them, Layla and Michelle McCool. And when they won, and when I believe Michelle won the Divas title, well, not the Divas title, the women's championship, and then they broke it in half and then created the Divas title for one of them to have. So that's kind of what it reminded me of. Now, I'm pretty sure they're not going to do that to the NXT women's title, but that's kind of what it was giving. And I really like this. Plus, Gigi looked really good in her little jumpsuit. Also in the comments, we have Najaquin, my boyfriend, saying #Team Gigi, of course. When it comes to this triple threat match, I'm definitely predicting that Roxanne Perez will definitely win her title and retain. But I feel like Gigi will definitely probably be the star of this situation. She will definitely be the star of this situation here, and it's gonna be cool. And JC's gonna put up a good fight too. But ultimately, Roxanne is gonna retain her title. And who knows, maybe you might see any of these women from NXT, on the Women's Royal Rumble. You never really know. They might have that opportunity because they do like to do that. So all of that was really cool. And it was a really cool, women centered episode of NXT. So more of what I liked in wrestling this week outside of the WWE world, I liked the women's match on AEW's Dynamite this week between Toni Storm and Ruby Soho. Now, this came to be because Ruby Soho, of course, aligned herself with Willow Nightingale, who had a birthday this week. Happy birthday, girl. And Toni was supposed to fight Willow last week, and she wound up cheating and using Saraya to distract Willow, and then they attacked her, and basically they turned heel on her, which I thought was really interesting, considering Saraya, came back and was like, oh, being our girl and everything, and and her making her return after a number of years away, from the ring. But now it seems like her and Toni Storm, since the whole secret tag team partner story and the whole Sheeta getting angry about it, angry about Saraya choosing Tony Storm thing, they have now turned their attention to feuding with the women who have aligned themselves or call themselves AEW originals or AEW homegrown, is what they said on the show. And Ruby, of course, isn't AEW homegrown because she did come through the indies, and then she did sign with NXT and then was on the main roster of WWE before, she got released, and then now she's here at AEW. But she really feels like, looking down on the women who came from the indies and into AEW is wrong. So, and because, of course, Tony and Saraya attacked Willow, she wanted to get her lick back, and Ruby got her lick back. Ruby wound up winning because Tony was distracted. Miss Tony, surprisingly, Saraya wasn't, in the match this week either. But Tony got distracted by Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, who is out with an injury, and we hope she feels better soon. Um, and I'm more than sure that even though Dr. Britt Baker, DMD, is traditionally heel, she's still the first woman that ever signed with AEW. And if you're going against the homegrown AEW talent, then that means you're coming after her. And I'm more than sure that she doesn't take too kindly to that. So she came out there, distracted Tony, and Ruby wound up getting the win here. And I feel like this story is very fascinating for me because we've seen different scenarios where people have had infighting within their company. It sort of reminds me of the invasion angle with WWE back in the day when WWE or WWF basically purchased WCW, and there was a fight between those who were in WCW, versus those who were in WWF and all of that. Like, it almost feels like that, except in the sense that maybe this, of course, this is the women, but I do like that the women are given this type of a storyline to sort of have a little bit of a beef going on, because I'm wondering, is there, some animosity there between the women who, I guess you could say, got it out the mud and helped to create AEW to what it is we know it as today. And then you have the people who've come in from larger, more older and more established companies, looking for refuge, away from that. And I'm just wondering how that's going to work. But either way, it's still very intriguing. And also a bonus, I love this jacket that Dr. Britt had on, and it looked like it had bees on it. Like, I don't know if that's a jacket that she's gonna sell at some point, but the fact that it matches with her colors in her Titantron and also with her gear or whatnot, like, I hope that they're selling it at some point because it was really cute. I liked it. Britt looked amazing. But yeah, I hope she does get better soon. And then also something that I liked with AEW is the fact that we heard from Adam Cole, baby. And he basically said that, he has AEW Revolution on his mind. Of course, that's taking place in March. But he, has a lot of goals when it comes to his return to AEW. He battled back from his concussion that he had suffered a couple months ago, and now he's back and he wants to fight the best of them. And honestly, when Adam Cole first came to AEW, I thought maybe he would kind of gun for the AEW title immediately, but he was doing other stuff, and he actually wound up winning the Owen Hart tournament along with Dr. Britt Baker, his lady love, who I hope he marries one day because I love. But either way, um I'm interested in seeing what else he has to offer as an athlete, and maybe he might go after the title. But the thing is, I'm wondering, if he's a heel, will he really go after MJF in that way, or will they make it a different type of thing? Because it's hard to root against Adam Cole because he's just so amazing. Like, he's such an amazing wrestler. He has an amazing, like, he's magnetic and stuff. Like, he's just really cool. And I just can't wait to see what else he has in store for us at AEW. Um it's so funny to see him, doing this now. But years ago, I had it in my mind that if they had ever called him up to the main roster in WWE from NXT, he would take over and challenge Roman Reigns. Like, I had that set as a prediction in my mind. But now here we are in the today of things. And it's okay. But, wishes, you never know what can happen. But to get to this part, I need to tone it down a little bit because it's a little bit serious. This is very serious, actually. Of course, last week we Suddenly, the wrestling community suffered a great loss with the passing of Jay Briscoe, who was one half of the Ring of Honor World Tag Team Champions, the Briscoes, with his brother Mark. Um, he, of course, passed away in a car accident while taking his daughters to cheerleading practice. And he passed away like in his, I believe, mid to late 30s. And this, of course, sent shockwaves throughout the wrestling community, and it made a lot of people sad. It made me sad. Even though I never really watched the Briscoes fully wrestle before due to um access to Ring of Honor stuff or lack of access to it, I still knew about them because I had seen them in passing and stuff, and I respected what they did in the ring. Like they were 13-time ROH tag team champions. Like if you think of ROH's version of the Usos, they would be it. And it was just such a sad situation. People are raising money for the Pugh family, and hoping that they're able to, land on their feet after this great tragedy. Like even Jim Cornette talked about on his podcast, how he got to know them as they were coming through and training and wrestling or whatnot. And he was really torn up about it. And he was talking about how they just built themselves up from the ground up, and how when Jay Briscoe passed away, like their hometown in Delaware canceled everything, closed all the schools, closed offices, everything, because the brothers are such a big deal up there. So it's just a really sad situation. But the beauty in these sad situations when it comes to wrestling is the fact that we all know how to gather together and show love to the person and to the family who's lost a person. And we know how to show love doing the one thing that we, love and love the most, which is wrestling or watching it. And on AEW's Dynamite, their main event was Mark Briscoe versus Jay Lethal. And when I tell you this match was good, it was good. Like, it was so good. I had never seen Mark Briscoe wrestle as a tag team wrestler before and or even as a singles wrestler before. But dang it, the way he wrestled in this match, I was surprised he was out there anyway to begin with, because when you lose a family member that you've been that close to, that's your brother. I know if it was me and if it was my sister, I wouldn't be doing anything. I wouldn't be on camera, nothing. But this man, a week later, and on his brother's heavenly birthday at that, came out there and wrestled a heck of a match. He did so good. And Jay Lethal, God bless him, he was crying from beginning to end. Like he was crying when he made his entrance, crying throughout the whole thing. Like, of course, he wrestled, and did a phenomenal job as he always tends to do. But then after the match was over, he still cried some more. Like he was a mess. But Mark, like, it didn't even really look like he was crying a whole lot, but of course he's going to live with that no matter what. So, and I don't know, what he does, to cope or, deal with it in his own way, but I just hope it's healthy, and I hope that he's surrounded by people who love him, who are telling him that everything's going to be okay and supporting him, praying with him, all the things. But during the match, he won the match with his brother's move, the J Driller, which was a stellar finisher. And then after he won and after he was celebrating and holding the tag team titles that they held together, he looked in the camera and said, "Jamin, I love you. I love you, boy." And I was just like, oh my God, this is so beautiful and so sad at the same time. And then the entire AEW ROH roster came out and gave him and Jay a round of applause as the show ended. Now, of course, Ring of Honor did an entire tribute to Jay Briscoe, which is now up on YouTube, I believe. So if you haven't watched it, please check it out. And it's free. So if you find it on Honor Club, you can watch it that way too. But I am just absolutely stunned that this man found the strength within to go on television and wrestle after his brother has left the physical plane. Like, I just cannot believe it, but he did it and he did it well. So major shout out, major props, and major love and blessings and healing to Mark Briscoe and the rest of his family as they continue to navigate their lives, without Jay. And I hope that Mark will be on television more, because I know Tony Khan, the CEO of AEW, had to fight tooth and nail to get Mark Briscoe even on television due to some past tweets that his brother made, that he apologized for, and he had to fight, Warner Brothers in order to get him on television. But clearly that was a fight that was worth fighting for, and we got this match out of it, so it was beautiful. And hopefully this won't be the last time we'll see Mark Briscoe on a bigger platform like this, because he did a fantastic job. If you haven't watched that match already, find a way to watch it because it was good. So love to the Briscoes, love to Mark, and love to his family, and also love to Jay because he did a good job. But he was very broken up about it because he came up with these guys. They built Ring of Honor together, so it was just beautiful. It was a beautiful display. I loved it. Yeah, and this is him holding both of the titles because he is still um considered a tag team champion at this point, even though his brother is no longer with him. Um, I haven't heard anything about what they're planning to do with the titles up until this point, but I guess pretty soon at some point, we will figure that out. But either way, it was beautiful. So I believe that is all that I liked well, no, that's not all that I liked in wrestling this week that's happened. Something else that I love that happened this week in wrestling is the announcement from Victor Perry, the teacher extraordinaire who is the creator of um the wrestling club in New York, announced that the wrestling club will be having a podcast called TWC Talks. And it's going to be all the kids learning about media and podcasting and stuff like that. And they're going to be talking about the assignments that they have, the matches that they've watched, and the events that they go to around New York, and, and stuff like that. And I love this because this is giving the children yet more education about, media work and podcasting, and it's giving them an outlet. And here again, this is another way in which Victor Perry who is also a friend of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast, because he's been on here before. If you haven't heard that episode, please go listen to it. It's called Mr. Perry's Wonderland. Please listen to it. It was a great time. All the ways in which he's giving them, outlets to, participate in, and exposing them to new horizons and new possible careers, that they could possibly have. It's just a blessing. And the fact that he's using wrestling to do it is just a beautiful thing. Like his work is just a godsend at this point in life. And him and those children are just a bright light in the world of wrestling, and I'm just so proud of them and everything that they continue to do and everything that they continue to accomplish. They have t-shirts that I know you can buy on For Your Wear along with my t-shirts as well. Like, they have so much going on for them, and I'm just so happy for them. Like, even last week, Carmelo Hayes had on one of their hoodies, and they were so excited about it. They were screaming about it on Twitter and stuff. It was just so good. And then I believe this week on NXT, somebody had a sign that said TWC as well. So they're getting lots of exposure, but those kids absolutely deserve it. And I love everything that they're doing. They even got to go to Battle Club Pro this past weekend too. And I heard they had a good time. So kudos to Victor Perry and those kids. Like, they deserve the world and everything in it. They deserve all the good things, all the love, everything, all the happiness that their hearts desire, and all the success. Oh, it's so good. You love to see it. And lastly, the last thing that I liked in wrestling this week or this past weekend was the fact that, Sir Wilkins had his first and what he says is his last match against Simon Miller of What Culture Wrestling at Battle Club Pro's Welcome to New York City. Of course, like I said, I wasn't able to attend this time as the sole sponsor of the match, which I'm still very proud of. But from what I saw, they did a good job. um Sir Wilkins worked really hard to train for this moment, and of course Simon mentioned on the last episode of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast, how much training he's gone through in order to accomplish all that he has in wrestling outside of his journalism work. Like, there's just so much that these men have put into wrestling, and they just deserve all the props and all the love. And I am also proud of Katrina from In Cat We Trust and Shay Sawyer from the Big Pop Theory podcast and Unpopular Review and Women's Wrestling Talk. Both of these women, they work with me on Women's Wrestling Talk, and I'm so proud that they were able to be representatives for the Hardy Wrestling Podcast in the place of me. It really does help to have friends in New York who love you and only want to see you succeed, and I love them and I want them to succeed as well. So this was just an amazing thing to have them represent, the Hardy Wrestling Podcast brand. I'm so happy they did that for me. So on this public platform, I wanted to say thank you. I've already thanked them in private, but I wanted to thank them in public as well. Like, thank you guys so much. I love you ladies so much. And hopefully one day I'll be back in New York at some point. And also, if you haven't checked these episodes out already, check out the HWP episodes that I had interviews with Sir Wilkins and Simon Miller. They were really great interviews that I'm very proud of. I've had Sir Wilkins on before, but like he said on that episode, that was when I was just doing audio. So if you haven't listened to it, you can also watch it on my YouTube channel. You can also watch the interview with Simon Miller on there as well. Please check that out. And just continue to support the show and continue to support them as wrestlers and also as wrestling journalists too. Yeah, they're just amazing people, and I'm just so glad to know them at this stage of my career. And I'm glad that my brand HWP was able to support them and their match. So, yeah, great stuff all around. So, that's everything that I liked in wrestling this week. Now, I'm going to go into da 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 a special segment where I'm going to be talking about Raw 30. I couldn't find a graphic that would be compatible with the slides for Raw 30. So I'm just going to use the old school Monday Night Raw logo from back in the day, which is 1993, which is weird to say back in the day because that was literally the year I was born, but it's okay. Um so I wanted to use this segment to talk about all the things that I liked and didn't like about Raw is 30 or Raw Triple X as people were putting on Twitter. Um this was a pretty amazing show. It was easy to be excited about this show simply because of the fact that it was of course the 30th anniversary, and the anniversary shows are always like a celebration and an opportunity to go back down memory lane and really think about how far a show has come since it's started or since you started watching it. Because, a show like Raw or even a show like SmackDown, like they have been on for a long time. And even if you might not have watched these shows from the very beginning, you do know where you started watching the show in the first place at any point of your life. So for me, like I said, since it started in January of 1993, I wasn't born yet. I was born in September of 93. So I'm more than sure that baby me was probably watching these episodes, not knowing what it was, with my dad holding me as an infant. But really, the first episode I ever noticed of Raw was like, during the Attitude Era with The Rock and Stone Cold. And of course, this was, of course, at the absolute height of the Monday Night War between them and WCW. So I had no clue what was going on. I was like 4 years old, had no clue what was happening, but it was still something big, and wrestling was very fascinating at that point. So to fast forward to now, we celebrated the 30th anniversary of Raw. And when I tell you they came in hot by starting with the trial for Sami Zayn on this episode of As the Bloodline Turns, oh my God. I cannot even begin to tell you how much this episode blew my mind. This episode of As the Bloodline Turns blew my mind. Of course, Roman Reigns is sitting there at the head of the table, of course. Then you have Solo Sikoa, the enforcer, standing there. You have the Usos sitting on the other side. And then you have Paul Heyman, who is serving as the prosecutor in this trial, um, in the sense of courtroom jargon. And when he started off, he was wearing a lei. They were all wearing leis. Of course, Sammy was not wearing a lei. So with this trial, Paul Heyman was looking to crucify Sami Zayn here. Like he was, as the crowd was chanting ECW at Paul Heyman, because of course this was in Philadelphia, which was the birthplace of ECW. Paul Heyman said, "Look, ECW is dead, and I wish I could say the same for Sami Zayn." And I was like, Jesus Christ, we coming in hot. We are coming in hot here. And then, of course, he presented exhibits A through D to show all the reasons why Sami Zayn should be excommunicated from the bloodline. They showed him running away when the Usos got jumped by sword ass Drew McIntyre, which is something that Paul Heyman actually called him on the show. So I'm not just saying that for the sake of saying that. They showed him like conversing with Kevin Owens and just so many different scenarios where it seemed like he was trying to center himself in the bloodline and make himself seem like he was above Roman Reigns. Like when he bumped Roman Reigns' shoulder when he was cutting a promo on SmackDown one time. Like he mentioned all of those scenarios, especially even at Survivor Series War Games when he was celebrating on the top of the cage and did symbol that said "for life." And Paul was like, "What does that mean? What does that even mean?" And he was just going crazy on him. Like he was getting ready to crucify Sami Zayn. And he was like, look, the prosecution rests. Like it's over for him. And then Sammy, of course, stood up and said that he really didn't have that much to say in terms of his defense. He was saying, "Look, it really hurts my feelings that you, Paul, of all people, are coming at me when you were the main one, calling me by a nickname, calling me Shmooly, which is I believe someone on a podcast, on a wrestling podcast, said is a Yiddish word or some type of Yiddish word for, Samuel. But either way, it's like a cute nickname between them. And he was calling him that for the past few weeks, making it seem like, him and Samuel was cool. And he was talking about how it really hurt his feelings that Roman would do this. And he said, everything I've done it because I love you guys like a family and like, this is a brotherhood. And this is really hurting my feelings. So I really don't have a defense. And Roman did not take this well. He was yelling. He was like, "How dare you do this after everything I've done for you?" And he yelled at Solo to attack him with the Samoan spike. And just when it looked like Sammy was getting ready to die, Jey Uso had his back and defended him. Jey Uso told Paul and Roman and said, "Look, no disrespect to y'all." And he called Roman Reigns the OG. And I was like, first of all, how you gonna call him an OG when you and your brother was in the company before he was? But either way, he said, "Look, I have my own evidence to present." And then when the evidence was up there, everybody got to cheering, and Paul was like, "So you went behind my back and got evidence?" And he was like, "Yeah." And then he showed every situation where Sammy had their back or took beatings for them, whether it be in the ring or behind the scenes, starting the music to distract other people so the Usos could win. Anytime Sammy tried to, give the upper hand to the Usos whenever they were trying to win a thing, or the upper hand to Roman. And Jey really did take up for him. And he said, "Look, in my eyes, you're bulletproof because you've taken lots of hits for us." And he was like, "You know what? Loyalty, like family does that. And I consider you my brother." And they hugged each other. They hugged it out. And it was just really shocking to me because Jey was the main one gunning for him, in the beginning. He was like, "Look, he don't belong here. He don't bleed for this bloodline like I do. He's not one of us." And to go from that to this, yo, yo, what the heck? It was just an emotional roller coaster, but it was a well performed, well acted, well crafted roller coaster. I loved it. I loved this segment from top to bottom. Roman Reigns found Sami Zayn not guilty for now, but he said that after, Raw, he didn't want to see Sami Zayn anymore until Saturday when he gets his final test to prove his loyalty, to the bloodline or whatever. And everybody's wondering what it could be. everybody is sort of, some people are predicting that Sami Zayn might be one of the main ones who could win the Royal Rumble, that could be his test. A lot of people are saying it could be a lot of things. But either way, this entire segment was fire. And then the fact that he got banished, but then later on you had the tag team match between the Usos and Judgment Day, and then Jimmy got injured, and then Sami had to fight in the place of Jimmy so the titles would stay in the bloodline. Like, it was just really crazy. So I'm wondering how that's even going to work at this point. Like, it's just insanity all around. But this episode of As the Bloodline Turns was amazing. And I can't wait to see what's going to happen Friday and Saturday. Cause baby, with all the drama surrounding Kevin Owens and him and the titles or whatnot, like, we are in for it. We are in for it. And I just cannot wait to see the rest of it. And honestly, I also cannot, and I also want to send a message to the Television Academy of the Primetime Emmys. What's wrong with y'all? Why can't y'all ever nominate WWE for their acting chops? Because y'all should have been nominated Jey Uso and Roman Reigns for some primetime Emmys. I know there has to be some type of category y'all can create for them for wrestling at night and the acting jobs that they do with these promos. There has to be something. It's like, you guys, when it comes to Hollywood, they constantly take from WWE, from wrestling period, and then create movie stars out of them and all this other stuff. And it's like, when they get Hollywood big, you don't want to give WWE the credit that they deserve for creating these stars already. And you don't nominate them, when they're in the WWE, but you nominate them for other things. And I'm just, or you don't nominate them for other things. But either way, the Bloodline should have been nominated for an Emmy years ago. They have helped carry, I say helped carry because there were other people who helped carry WWE during the pandemic and all that now, but they helped carry the pandemic in a numerous amount of eras at this point. And all of the acting chops that these men have displayed, all the crying, all the emotions, all the things, especially in that Hell in a Cell match between Roman and Jay, they should have been got an Emmy. Television Academy, do better. Just do better, okay? Because seriously, they should have got one. And that's my rant for that. But moving on. Like I said, it was just really great stuff all around. I loved it. But let's also talk about Biker Taker coming back. To antagonize LA Knight, who of course has to fight Bray Wyatt. And then Bray Wyatt came out to antagonize LA Knight after Biker Taker came back. Of course, this is the version of the Undertaker that came out sort of like towards the end of the Attitude Era into the Ruthless Aggression era, and he was riding on a motorcycle. Like, that was a cool version of the Undertaker that a lot of people love. And he came out at Raw 30 dressed like that with his old song that was Kid Rock's American Bad A. Like, seriously, like, that was really cool, and I popped heavy for that. But the fact that him and Bray Wyatt had this moment where Taker whispered in Bray Wyatt's ear and shared something with him, it just gave me chills because this is something that I've been waiting for a number of years. Because when you think of characters in WWE, the greatest character a lot of people say of all time is the Undertaker because he maintained it for so very long. Like, there were people in life who grew up and literally believed that this man really was out here being a mystical dark being for a number of years. And the fact that he kept it going this long until he finally retired, is just a testament to the performer that The Undertaker or Mark Calloway is and how dedicated he was to the wrestling business. And when you think of that dark character, and then when you think of the modern era and you look at Bray Wyatt and everything he's done as a dark character, with the Wyatt family, him with the Fiend, him with the Firefly Funhouse, even though it might have seemed that a lot of people did not understand that immediately, it was still, a Prince of Madness, a Prince of Darkness element there for the modern era. Because a lot of people are like, oh, there's no characters like, the Undertaker anymore because, kayfabe's dead because there's social media and all this other da 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 da. But Bray Wyatt, though, he's still in it and he's still here giving us this amazing character. Like, this man has gone from Husky Harris all the way to this. And the fact that he worked this hard for this character, this Uncle Howdy, whatever it is that he's doing, to get to this moment right here on the screen with the dark Undertaker, with the dark biker taker, who basically opened the door for Bray Wyatt to be like this. Masterclass. Well done. Chef's kiss. Loved it. Loved it. Loved it. This is the stuff that moments are made of. And I'm more than sure wrestling fans who have children are going to tell their children and their grandchildren about this. And it's just going to be great. So this was fantastic. I loved every inch of this. They loved it. And that's all that matters. Like, yo, I want to know what he said to him. But then again, I don't want to know. Because in my mind, I just think the Undertaker passed the darkness to him. And that's all I'm going to say. But this moment was amazing. Also, I'm gonna talk about this real quick. DX with Imperium was pretty funny, but DX by themselves, along with Kurt Angle, who has never been in DX ever, they have to replace Billy Gunn with somebody because Billy Gunn can't be a part of the things because he's with AEW now, and it's sad. But either way, you know, Kurt Angle was out there with them, and it was funny, but when Imperium came out there and made fun of them and it's just like DX was acting like they were all gonna fight them. They were all giving all the reasons as to why they can't. They're either retired or too old to fight or too broken to fight. And it's sad to, really come to grips with that. It's just the older you get, the older your heroes get. Oldness comes for us all, and oldness has come for the superheroes on our television screen, guys. So DX can't fight anymore. They can't fight Imperium. But ultimately, they sent the Street Profits and Seth Rollins to fight Imperium. And the funniest part about all of this was the fact that when Seth Rollins came out, and y'all know his song, oh, Shawn Michaels was singing the song off key. And when the song went off, when Seth Rollins' song went off, he was like, oh, and he was like, oh, the song's over. It was so funny. Like, I was weak and I was just like, oh my God, he was feeling it a little bit too much. And then when the Street Profits came out and their song came on, Triple H was nodding his head like, And I was just like, oh my God, they're so cute. Like, I know people were angry at him for all the booking stuff because it's just, I'll get into that later. But this was really funny. This was really funny. And it was just, it had no right to be that funny, but it just was. And yeah, they may be older now and they may be all retired, but they're still timeless to us. And the only thing that I wish is that Billy Gunn and also China was there. But, life. It was just really funny and I enjoyed it. And also, when it came to booking this 6-man tag team match, Triple H was saying, I wish there was someone like a leadership figure or a general manager who could make sense of this. Enter Big Bama Teddy Long. Big Bama Teddy Long came out there. Hall of Famer Teddy Long. Birmingham born Teddy Long. On my Alabama Wrestling t-shirt on foryourwear.com/Hardy Wrestling Podcast, Teddy Long came out and booked a 6-man tag team match to take place. And I was so happy to see him do the dance and everything. I was just like, okay, Teddy Long, come through, Big Bama, come through. I'm always happy to see him because he's just representation, and I just love him so much. And I will always respect him and love him for coming on my show, the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. Like, we didn't have to. He didn't know me. He didn't know me from a can of paint. He just saw me on social media. And then when he saw I was from Alabama, he wanted to come on my show. So if you haven't listened or watched that episode with the interview with Teddy Long, please go back on my YouTube channel or, listen to the audio version of it. But yeah, Teddy Long did come on my show and it was such an honor to have him. He's such an esteemed guest that I will always cherish. And it's always good to see him on television. We really have to, cherish these moments. So yeah, big props to Birmingham's own Teddy Long. Like, it was just really great to see him. And then another great part of Raw 30 was just the representation of black women. I know a lot of the women's wrestling fandom was upset with the episode, but there was a positive that I did pick out when it comes to people of color. Now, 30 years ago, I'm more than sure that no one could have imagined that some of the top champions in WWE are all people of color. Like Roman Reigns, he's the undisputed Universal Champion. And he's a Samoan man. You have the Usos, who are Samoan, and they're a part of the dynasty, and they're the tag team champions. You have Bianca Belair, who was on the episode, and she is a black woman with a women's title. Um, I'm not sure if on the first episode of Raw there was female representation with wrestling. Um, but either way, and I'm definitely not sure if back then there was female representation with the announcers or with the referees. I'm more than sure it wasn't. But seeing how far we've come with the improvements that we've made culturally, it was really good to see Alicia Taylor of NXT ring announcing for Raw 30. Like, it was just really cool. And I just love seeing her wherever she is, whether it be NXT or anywhere else or SmackDown or wherever. Like, I just love seeing her. Like, she even did the ring announcing for War Games this past year. It was just really cool. And I'm just a huge fan of her. So it was great to see her this past Monday doing the ring announcing. Yeah, and of course this is a picture of her doing a ring announcing for the Austin Theory Bobby Lashley match, which was the main event for the US title. And I was just really excited to see her perform that way and have on the red colors to match with the whole Raw decor. It was just amazing. She's a rock star and she deserves all of the things and all of the love. Also, Miss Aja Smith, the first black female referee WWE has ever had, she refereed Bianca versus Sonya. And it was just really good to see her because, like I said, a long time ago, 30 years ago on Raw, I'm more than sure that there was no representation in that way. And the fact that we have it now, it's just really great. And I've talked about, before on episodes previously, especially even on Black History Month, how much I love Aja Smith, and how I love, her history before she became a referee and her romance with her husband, Leon Ruffin, because he was with the company at one point, but now he's not anymore. But still, he's still finding success, and their marriage is just something that's just really beautiful. And then when Raw came to Birmingham a few weeks ago, I got to yell at her and say, "I love you, Aja," and she appreciated it, and I was just like, "Oh my god, she heard me." But yeah, it was just really cool to see her on this Raw 30 episode because years ago that representation wasn't there and now it is. So I'm just really happy that that's there with and the level of representation that her and Alicia and Bianca were able to show as black women was just really cool. So I just really really appreciated that. So Raw 30 had a lot of great moments, a lot of funny moments, lots of cool stuff all around. But now I have to get into the part that I didn't necessarily like, the parts that I did not necessarily like about Raw 30. And I have to be honest, I have to be true to myself. And I'm going to try to discuss this in a way here again that's not, so negative to the point to where I'm just going to destroy it because I did enjoy the show overall. But at the same time, I do have to address the problems. So, my problems with Raw 30 dates a little bit before the show even happened. Of course, like I mentioned before, Raw, the very first episode of Raw, was January the 11th of 1993. And this was in New York, right? So, like I said, when you think about the date of January the 11th, and when you think of anniversaries, most people do celebrate their anniversary or try to celebrate their anniversaries on the day it actually is, on the actual holiday. And when it comes to WWE, they really didn't go by that because, of course, January the 11th was on a Wednesday this year. So if they did celebrate Raw 30 during that week, that would have placed them in a very special place that's near and dear to my heart Yeah, there's Shawn Michaels on that first episode too. But if they had celebrated the 30th anniversary of Raw on the actual week it happened, it would have happened to at a city that's very near and dear to my heart, and that's Birmingham. That's Birmingham, Alabama. Of course, we had a great time. Me and my boyfriend had an amazing time at the show. I met a number of fans of the Hardy Wrestling podcast at the show. Um, a lot of friends and everything. And of course, I had my Hardy Wrestling podcast sign, throughout the night. It was fun to be there. And then also considering it was the first Raw to come to Birmingham in 7 years, we still had a good time. We saw all kinds of amazing stuff, like Alexa Bliss cutting a promo on top of the commentary desk as Uncle Howdy acted like he was gonna come out and get her. Um, I met the littlest Hardy Wrestling podcast fan in PAX, who is the daughter of one of my co-workers, Jessica, at the law firm that I work at in the city. She has a daughter named Pax who's in this picture right now, and she loves wrestling so much. And her favorites are the Hardys, go figure. And when she got into wrestling, she got into it really heavily. And when I told Miss Jessica that I had a podcast, she was over the moon about it. And I met her, I got to meet her this day, and she is just the sweetest little girl, and I'm just so glad that she had a good time at the show. It was her first time at a wrestling show, so I'm really glad I got to meet her. So it was just not lots of good things about the Raw show in Birmingham. Like, I still had fun, but I still had a little bit of beef with the idea that WWE chose to celebrate their anniversary um not here, but in Philadelphia, which also kind of didn't really have anything to do with Raw's beginning. Even though they could have had it in New York, but they chose not to, and then they chose to have it in Philadelphia. And I know they probably did that due to the whole business dealing of them having WrestleMania in Philadelphia next year. I definitely know intelligently and business wise, that's probably why they did the 30th anniversary there. I know that. But a part of me was kind of upset a little that they didn't celebrate the 30th anniversary with us. Like, why? Like, why, why not? Like, just why not? And then they chose to celebrate it 2 weeks after the fact in a bigger city, in a bigger market, I guess. But, to me, it almost gave off the impression that we weren't necessarily good enough for that type of 30th anniversary celebration thing. But, I guess business is business. And it's like my boss, TK Trinidad from Women's Wrestling Talk says, WWE doesn't really care about our feelings. But, that was kind of my first beef with Raw 30 anyway, because I really did think that they were going to have the 30th anniversary episode here when I saw the date, but they didn't. And they went to Philadelphia instead. But yeah, that was my first beef with Raw's 30. My second beef was the fact that the out of all of the women legends that you booked for Raw is 30, you only booked one, and that's Alundra Blaze. And that's no shade to Alundra Blaze because she did a lot when it comes to women's wrestling in WWE. And of course, she made a lot of history when she went to WCW too. If you know, you know. But either way, that was the only woman's legend that they had on the show. There weren't any more in comparison to the number and the flocks of legendary men that they had on the show. When I think of legendary men they had on Raw is 30. They had Biker Taker. They had Ron Simmons with APA with JBL, who was there with Baron Corbin. They had IRS. They had just so many. And then they had all of DX, right? So it's just like they had a lot of, and they even had Ted DiBiase, the $1 Million Man there. They had a number, they even had the Godfather. They had a number of male legends be on the show. But y'all were only able to get one female legend. Y'all couldn't get anybody else? Nobody else? I understand that there are some of the legends who are at other promotions or whatever. Like, you couldn't get a video from them saying happy anniversary or nothing? Like, what the heck is that? Um, literally Alundra Blaze was just playing poker at the APA poker lounge for a long period of time, and that was it. What was that? I felt like that was a little lazy to me, and that's, you know, that was my one of my other beefs with Raw 30 is the fact that there was a lack of OG women representation on Raw as 30, and I felt like that wasn't fair. Then on top of that, to stay in the women's side of things, you advertise a steel cage match, the first Raw women's steel cage match in over 19 years, they said, between Becky Lynch and Bayley, who have been beefing for the past couple of weeks. And because they said Fightful Select reported that a couple of segments ran too long, they couldn't do it, and then they wound up having Damage Control jump Becky Lynch, and the match wound up not happening at all. It was like, it was very disappointing for me because as a fan of women's wrestling and as a person who fights for the equality of women everywhere, including in wrestling, and as a person who has watched Raw my entire life and have seen women get 60-second matches to no matches at all, get their matches cut for male segments that took forever or just, were on the show for the sake of it being on the show or prioritized more than their segments. And as a person who always asks my daddy, when are they going to let the women fight for real like the men do? And as a fan that have watched the women up until the modern era fight in bra and panties matches and mud matches and, Playboy pillow fights and stuff like that, Raw has been through the ringer when it comes to its treatment of its women. And the fact that you have the 30th anniversary show and you have the chance to have a history making women's match and it doesn't happen, that's a little bit tone deaf. And honestly, I've never booked a show and I never really want to have that responsibility. But if it were me, I would have just made the steel cage match the main event. That could have been the main event, and you could have utilized that match being the main event by talking about all the moments in which the women have main evented Raw, like with Trish and Lita and when they main evented Raw, and all the millions of times Charlotte and Sasha main evented Raw, and so many other different scenarios where the women have main evented Raw and how it's the norm. If you did that on the 30th anniversary, where I'm more than sure there wasn't any women representation on the very first episode of Raw 30 years ago, that would have been cool. That would have been socially relevant. But no, you cut it. For what? You mean for all these extra segments where people like the racist formerly known as Hulk Hogan could just come on there and talk with a broken microphone and Jimmy Hart wasn't doing anything except standing there? A segment where, well, not a segment, but a whole match for the United States title that you probably could have placed on a different area of the card or possibly just moved to next Monday. What? As a fan of women's wrestling throughout my entire life and watching the evolution of it from beginning, or at least from my beginning as a viewer to now, this was very disappointing. It was very disappointing. 30 years, you're celebrating 30 years of Raw, and this major match that you advertise fully, and it just doesn't happen. And I know this has happened before because, of course, in wrestling, the rule is that the card is subject to change. But at the same time, if the card was going to be subject to change, it should have been changed to prioritize the women for once. Prioritize the women. Put them in the main event. You could have done that. And also when it comes to talking about women's moments, of course, they did show a little bit of women's moments that happened in the past, on the commercial, in the parts between the commercial breaks and the show coming back on. But there was just more that just could have been done. And it just felt like when it came to this part, it just fell short for me. And I hated that. I really hated that. And then the idea that when it came to female representation, we had more of it in the form of Charlotte Flair. And I love Charlotte because, of course, a lot of her career got jumped off on Monday Night Raw. And that's something that she did make mention of after her father introduced her. And talked about how proud he was of her, which is something that we've heard a lot. Of course, you're a great dad. You're a good dad. You're proud of the success of her and all of that. But another thing that I didn't like about this segment was the fact that Charlotte was talking about all of the wars that she had fought on Raw between the likes of Nikki Bella and so many other women. And guess who she left out? Miss Monet. Charlotte left out Mercedes Monet, formerly known as Sasha Banks. When I tell you that that really irritated me as a huge fan of Mercedes Monet, and watching their rivalry out of all of the interviews I've heard them had where they call each other, Flair and Steamboat, for her to go on there and not even mention her name. I'm not sure if Charlotte was allowed to even say her name, but my thing is, if you already put Mercedes in like the beginning montage of the show where you showed all the moments that had happened on Raw in the modern era, if you had already shown her win that Falls Count Anywhere match for the Raw Women's title that time, because this was the picture of it, this was the match where it happened, then why couldn't you say her name? Why couldn't you say her name? That disappointed me, because you will not erase her and you will not erase the fact that Mercedes Monet gave you some of the greatest matches in y'all's rivalry, whether it be on Raw, whether it be on NXT, and even, you guys made history together. Y'all had the first Iron Woman match, on a pay-per-view. You guys had the first pay-per-view main event for women in Hell in a Cell. You couldn't say her name once? I understand if you weren't allowed to, but the idea that you did it, knowing full well we saw all of this, just made me sad. It really made me sad that this is the point where we're at. Like, it just made no sense to me. It's like, if we saw her on the package, then how come you couldn't say her name? It just made no sense to me. But yeah, and then after that, we had the match between Bianca and Sonya, which we've seen billions of times before, and it's just like, okay. I'm not mad when I'm never mad when Bianca Belair is on my screen as the current Raw Women's Champion. Like, I'm never angry about it. But the idea that we got that match yet again when we didn't necessarily need it, it was just like, okay, yeah, that's it. And then on top of that, when you think of all the rivalries that they could have highlighted, or when it comes to women's wrestling history in terms of Raw, it's like you could have mentioned Trish versus Jazz, because I remember this rivalry. It was heated, baby, heated. You could have mentioned Mickey versus Trish. Like, seriously, Mickey just won the Knockouts title, who you guys had in your in your Royal Rumble last year, and they had a storied rivalry, and y'all could have brought that up. Y'all could have talked about even AJ Lee, AJ Mendez, and Caitlyn. Like, y'all could have brought them up. I understand it was during a different time where they were called divas or whatever, but it still counts within the realms of women's wrestling history. This is stuff that y'all could have easily brought up. Y'all could have brought up Nikki and Paige, and definitely the Bella twins were very vocal about it. And they were also very vocal about the fact that even though they had put them on the poster, they said they didn't have any plans for them. And I'm just like, what? Y'all really could have had plans for them. You could have had them like challenge like Dakota Kai and Io Sky in a non-title tag team match. Like, that's something that maybe could have happened. I'm not sure if they're in wrestling shape or something, or you could have had them cut a promo on them or something, or cut a promo on Bayley. There are ways that you could have utilized these OG women, and the fact that they didn't just made me sad. You even had the likes of Eve Torres, like all of these women. It's like, even though the past isn't necessarily the cleanest, the history is still there. And the fact that it wasn't utilized as best as it could have been just really disappointed me. So hopefully that clears up everything of how I felt about Raw 30, but in the end, I did wind up liking the show as a whole, but there were still certain parts about it I didn't, necessarily like in terms of its female representation. So hopefully, that came across, in that segment. And hopefully this doesn't make you guys feel like, oh, well, she's changing or she's being negative or something like that. But I just had to be real. And that really did disappoint me. I had to talk about that. But either way, all in all, it was a great show that did press all the nostalgia buttons because because when it came to that montage at the beginning, they showed all those videotapes. And when I tell you that that was my life when it came to my dad taping those matches, on VHS, like that was my life for a long time. And that really spoke to me, the fact that I was raised watching this. Like it's real serious when you sit down and like really think about the fact that throughout your whole life this show has been on, and it's continuing to grow in various ways. And with it growing in various ways, I hope that Raw does last 30 more years, and then maybe one day we'll celebrate Raw 60. Who knows? But either way, the celebration was cool. It was solid in certain parts, but not solid in others. And I just really hope that with the backlash, with the hashtag WWE Women Deserve Better, that people will understand that fans want to see women's wrestling. Women's wrestling does sell. Men and women both care about women's wrestling. I don't care what you heard or what you think or whatever, or what you thought you heard or what you thought you knew. Women's wrestling matters and people really care about it. We care about the history of it. We care about the cultivation of it. We care about its continuance. Like we care. And then when stuff like this happens, people wonder why we ask for evolutions and empowers and stuff like that, because y'all be booking stuff like y'all don't care, and it's not right. But we got to do better. And speaking of doing better, something else that happened on Raw 30 that I didn't like was the return of one Brock Lesnar, who seems to just keep having beefs with black men, and I hate it. It's like he came and interfered in the Bobby Lashley Austin Theory match. And I'm sorry I didn't have any pictures of that, but either way, he interfered in it and allowed for Austin Theory to retain the United States title. And it just seems like him and Bobby are always going to have this beef that's low-key one-sided, because Bobby never goes after him, but it's always Brock coming after him, and it's just not fair. And it almost gives me the impression that Brock does not like black people or doesn't like black men. Like, because when you think about how he beat Kofi Kingston in those seconds, and I know looking at this picture might give you some PTSD there, but it's just the truth. Like that happened. And then it's like when you think about how at day one last year he beat Big E and pinned Big E clean for the WWE title. It And with him bullying Bobby Lashley, it just keeps it it keeps happening, to the point to where it gives that whenever there's a champion that just so happens to fit a certain hue like mine, you always have to come after them. And it's just like, bruh, what is your problem? What did we do to you? Like, what? But whatever. I could have done without him at the end of Raw's 30. But that's really all that I liked and didn't like about Raw's 30. And now we're going to go to the conclusion and the call to action. Well, not the call to action. I'm tripping. Okay, we're not doing the call to action. We're going to end the show with predictions for the Royal Rumble, which is taking place this Saturday in San Antonio, Texas at the Alamo Dome. If you're going, I'm really proud of you. I'm glad that you're going to have that moment. I'll be watching, but I will be on Women's Wrestling Talks Royal Rumble after show. So please watch that if you have an opportunity to follow Women's Wrestling Talk everywhere. We're going to watch it, and then after we watch it, we're going to do the after show and we're going to talk about it. So let's get into my predictions for the Royal Rumble. Now, of course, we have Bianca Belair versus Alexa Bliss for the Raw Women's title. Now, my prediction is like, with Alexa Bliss, trying to claim that Bray Wyatt and Uncle Howdy don't have any control over her, I feel like they're going to be the main reason why she loses this match. Like, I understand, like, the last segment where we saw her and Alexa Bliss, outside of Raw 30, where she was beating her up in the crowd, and then Uncle Howdy came out, and then Alexa, beat up on Bianca and used the chair to do it. Like, I understand that happened, but I ultimately believe that Bray Wyatt is coming to get his lick back from Alexa because she was the one that undid him at WrestleMania a few years back. Like, I really feel like they're coming after her for that. And she's trying to deny it and trying to make it seem like, I'm the face of evil. I'm the one in control. No, you're not, sis. You are not in control. Bray is, ma'am. And I hate to say that, but it's true. Like, these people, the crazy Bray Wyatt darkness is coming for you, ma'am. And it's gonna cost you your Raw Women's title opportunity. So my prediction is that Bianca Belair is going to retain her Raw Women's title because it is not time for her to lose it yet. It's just not. The forces of darkness are going to lose to Bianca Belair's light. Watch her shine, like her theme song says. Watch her shine now. Watch her shine now. She never needed you at all, okay? Bianca is retaining, and that's all there is to it. My next prediction is that there's a possibility that Charlotte might have to defend her title against Sonya Deville. That is, if they announce that on SmackDown tomorrow. But or as I'm recording this is Thursday, Friday's coming up, and then SmackDown's gonna happen. But if they have the match at the Royal Rumble for the SmackDown Women's title, I'm predicting that Sonya Deville might be a little bit rough and tumble or might go crazy, but ultimately Charlotte will retain her title because, like I said, she just won it, and Sonya just needs to relax and stop thinking she's entitled to things when, you know, she's just going around and acting like an out of control child. Like, you can't just come up and just skip the line and all this other stuff and just think you could just, ask, and just bum rush folks for things. That's not how life works, ma'am. So I hope that if they don't fight on SmackDown and if they fight at the Royal Rumble, that Charlotte will beat her once and for all. But then there's the catch where Sonya could enter the women's Royal Rumble match and still fight in that as well. So either way, I'm predicting that if this match does happen at the Royal Rumble, that Charlotte will retain and Sonya will lose, but then she'll try and enter the Royal Rumble. Or if this match doesn't happen at the Royal Rumble at all, she'll still be in the Royal Rumble match and then she'll, give it a go there. So there's my prediction for that. That is, if that match happens. My next prediction is a big one. The 30-woman Royal Rumble match. As it stands now, the women who have announced themselves for the match is, of course, Emma, Shayna Baszler, Liv Morgan, Rhea Ripley, I think Rhea Ripley has announced herself for the Women's Royal Rumble because a lot of people are saying that she might enter the Men's Royal Rumble too, considering she's been jumping in men's faces here lately. Like, it's crazy. It's like they're sort of trying to push her as if she could be the new China, and I'm here for it, but Jesus Christ. It's crazy. She could possibly, go forth and possibly win both or just win one of them. But either way, she's in it. Raquel Rodriguez is in it. Candice LeRae and Zelina Vega are all in the match. And the rest of the women are a mystery. Now, like I said earlier, I predict that some of the NXT women might get in on the action. But I have more than one choice for who I think could win. I think Rhea is definitely a top choice considering she has come close but no cigar multiple times when it comes to the Royal Rumble match, especially famously when Bianca Belair won it. And um and then of course if she does win, she could challenge Charlotte Flair and then she could get back at her for she could move to SmackDown and then move Dominic to SmackDown, and that could be a whole thing with Dominic and his dad, and they could still antagonize him. So if she wins, she could challenge Charlotte for the SmackDown Women's title and try to get her lick back from all those years ago when Charlotte took her NXT title. But you could also have Liv win it because she's been on the struggle bus lately and been acting more extreme and masochistic lately. So it's a lot of choices as to who will win, but ultimately, in a very happy and perfect world, I would love it if Zelina Vega could win it because Miss Ma'am needs a chance at a singles title. She hasn't had a chance at a singles title since her first run in on the main roster before she got released because of all that Twitch stuff. And then now she's back, and I just feel like she deserves another opportunity to be more than just the queen from Queens that won the first Queen's crown. She deserves a chance. She deserves a title shot. Like, I want her to have a title at some point. But, that's just what I would want. But ultimately, I feel like it's greatly possible that either Rhea Ripley could win it or a certain somebody who we haven't seen in a couple of months could make a comeback and could win the Royal Rumble, i.e., Trinity Fatu, aka Naomi. She could come back. And that would be cool too. Because could you imagine if the ovation that would happen if Naomi came back after having that really cool moment in 2020 when she came back, and then her and Charlotte had that standoff, and then one of her greatest matches on SmackDown was versus Charlotte last year? Like, if she came back and challenged Charlotte or Bianca, that would be lit. But either way, my two choices are Rhea and Naomi, that is, if she's returning. So those are my predictions for the women's Royal Rumble match. Now, for this first ever Mountain Dew pitch black match between LA Knight and Bray Wyatt, I'm confused because LA Knight, kind of has a good opportunity to win because of the fact that Bray Wyatt thinks he has the upper hand with the darkness stuff. And ever since The Undertaker might have gassed him up on Raw this past Monday, he feels like he's got the juice, right? But the last time, you have to also think about the fact that a few weeks ago when he was encountering LA Knight and then Uncle Howdy came out there, Uncle Howdy attacked Bray. He didn't attack LA Knight, he attacked Bray. So if Uncle Howdy does show up, does that mean that ruins Bray Wyatt's chance of winning this match and it gives LA Knight an upper hand? Or will Bray Wyatt have control of Uncle Howdy and wind up destroying LA Knight? Who knows, considering I've never seen a pitch black match before, but either way, I still find it intriguing. We'll just have to see. But a part of me wants to predict and say that Bray Wyatt is going to win this match because, he has the upper hand when it comes to the darkness. But either way, it's just going to be an intriguing watch. So that's my prediction for that one. Then we got this bad baby of a match. Roman Reigns versus Kevin Owens for the undisputed WWE Universal Championship. This rivalry has many chapters, but it's never boring. And the idea that you have Sammy and the bloodline, and then you also have Sammy and his former friendship with Kevin Owens, and all of this tied into it makes for a very interesting story and for an interesting turnout or an interesting turn of events in what could possibly happen. I'm predicting Roman Reigns will ultimately win because I just feel like you don't have a WrestleMania without Roman Reigns as the champion. And that's no shade to Kevin Owens because Kevin is amazing. He's an amazing wrestler, amazing promo. And he's been coming in hot lately, beating up everybody and talking later. But ultimately, Roman is going to win because you just don't have a big brand WrestleMania in Inglewood. It's Inglewood, not Hollywood, y'all. Um, without Roman Reigns as champion at this point. So I'm predicting that Roman is going to win. But then you also here again have the X factor of Kevin Owens entering the men's Royal Rumble and fighting it out there. So either way, you just never know. And also the same with Alexa Bliss too. So that's an X factor there. And of course, last but certainly not least, the 30-man Royal Rumble match. As it stands, the people who have announced themselves, the men who have announced themselves is Omos, Santos Escobar of Legado del Fantasma, Bobby Lashley, Seth freaking Rollins, Ricochet, Baron Corbin, Austin Theory, Kofi Kingston, the Royal Rumble God. Because he gonna pull some acrobatics to try and stay in the match. I feel like before he retires, they have to let him win one more time. Let him win a Royal Rumble before he retires. Please, Lord, please. You have Gunther in the match. You got Rey Mysterio in the match. And of course, we have the returning American Nightmare. I cut promos in St. Vincent's Hospital where babies come from and goats come from Rhodes. My God. I'm predicting that either Cody Rhodes is going to definitely win the Royal Rumble and achieve his dream that he said he set out to do when he first got to WWE, and that's win the WWE Championship that eluded his dad due to some technicality. RIP Dusty Rhodes. Or by some weird hook or crook, Sami Zayn could win the Royal Rumble too. There is a lot going on. There is a lot riding in the story, but it's all really exciting. And I cannot wait for this Royal Rumble to take place. And honestly, the Royal Rumble pay-per-view just has a special place in my heart because, of course, 2020, 3 years ago today, as a matter of fact, was the 2020 Royal Rumble, and all of the events that happened there and the events that happened afterward was the catalyst for the Hardy Wrestling Podcast to happen, because this was the first subject I talked about. So it's always a special place in my heart. That usually means that the anniversary of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast is coming up. It's February the 8th. It's the third anniversary, so 3 is the magic number, as De La Soul likes to say. And this Royal Rumble is going to be lit. I'm very excited about it. So, like I said, it's Saturday on Peacock and also on the WWE Network if you're in other countries. Please check it out and please have fun. And also check me out on Women's Wrestling Talk for our after show after the Royal Rumble is over, because we got stuff to discuss. We're going to have a time and I'm excited. So that's all for my Royal Rumble predictions. And now we'll actually have the call to action. So, with my call to action, now that we've reached the end of our time together, I would like to say that the Hardy Wrestling Podcast has been accepted for a fan table at Comic-Con for the second year in a row. Comic-Con is an anime convention that takes place in Birmingham every February, and I participated in it for the first time last year and had tons of fun interviewing people, talking about wrestling, getting the word out about the show and everything. It was fantastic. We had a great time together. And yeah, I got approved for it this time, and I'm really excited to be a part of it, even though I feel like I just found out today. So it's really cool. It was really cool to get that email from them, and shout out to them for accepting me, because you totally didn't have to, but you did, and I appreciate that. Now, of course, last year I had, my table, had the microphone, had the TV with some of my interviews going and some favorite matches going and buttons and stuff. So I don't know exactly what I'm going to do for decor this year, but either way, something's going to get done. And I'm just excited to see everyone at Comic-Con this year. I'm pumped. And of course, I'm still selling my Select Your Alabama Wrestling Fighter t-shirts on foryourwear.com/Hardy Wrestling Podcast. Please, you can buy the t-shirts. You can buy the t-shirts in red or black in various sizes, from small to, I believe, triple or 4 extra large. And like I always advertise, the t-shirts of course have Alabama icons and wrestling on there, like Teddy Long, who you saw on Raw is 30 this week, Kayla Braxton, who is a broadcaster on WWE programming, Deborah, who was a famous manager in WWE during the Attitude Era, Fuego del Sol, who you've seen on AEW, AQA, who's been on AEW and WWE as well, Paul Bearer, who you famously know as the manager for both Undertaker and Kane, and last but certainly not least, Sensational Sherry, who was an amazing women's champion and manager in her own right. All of these people are from Alabama. So if you are from Alabama, or even if you're not from Alabama and you just think the shirt is cool, please go on foryourwear.com/Hardy Wrestling Podcast, or you could just go on the website foryourwear.com and look up the logo for the Hardy Wrestling Podcast and you'll find it there. The t-shirts are available in red and black. The hoodies are available in red and black. Please buy one. It's really beautiful. It's really great. Please support the brand. And with that, we've reached the end of our time together. So please know, if you want to find me and figure out what I've got going on in my wrestling journey, you can always follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Queen Steph Hardy. You can all, just like it says on the bottom of the screen. You can also listen to the Hardy Wrestling Podcast everywhere you get your shows. That's Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, just everywhere you can listen to audio, you can find that podcast. Just type it in, you'll find the logo, and then you can listen to all the audio. And of course, I want to encourage you to subscribe to my YouTube channel. We're at 124 subscribers, but let's get those numbers up. Let's continue to support the show. Watch my interviews, watch all the episodes as they go live. They will be on the channel at least in 45 minutes after the episode goes up, unless I recorded it or something like that. Please check out my last two episodes with Sir Wilkins and Simon Miller of What Culture. Those were really great interviews I was happy to have. Please check those out. And also follow me on TikTok at Stephanie_Hardy, because I'm getting my TikTok on as well with my wrestling content too. So please get that cracking and just continue to support the brand, continue to support me and my journey as a host, writer, color commentator extraordinaire. Your girl is growing, and we're preparing to just celebrate the 3rd anniversary of this show. It's just been a beautiful journey so far, and it's only going to get better. And of course, I hope that if you're watching and if you are going to listen to this later, that you're having an amazing time in your life. I hope that you're taking care of yourself, you're eating your vitamins, you're not eating your vitamins and saying your prayers, not that. But if you are saying your prayers, that is great though. Eating fruit and doing all the things you need to do, taking it easy, resting your mind and not overdoing it or overworking yourself. And just know that you are capable of great things and you deserve to celebrate where you have come, because I'm more than sure you are not the same person that you were years ago. So that deserves to be celebrated. Just know that that deserves to be celebrated. You deserve to be celebrated. And that's my last message for tonight. So until next time, this is your girl, Stephanie Hardy of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. And until next time, bye, y'all.